Thank you, very kind. So I'm Harry. I'm one of the first clinical entrepreneurs at NHS England. I also helped Tony to run some aspects of that. I'm the co-founder of a company called Care Rooms, medical advisor to My M Health, and I'm part-time at A&E Reg in my spare time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's important to the entrepreneurs of the future. I'm trying to break that down into 4 questions. So why do we need to innovate? What we're doing about it, and then something which is close to my heart, the Clinical Entrepreneur Program. And then if I do a good enough job of pitching it, Tony, we can show you how you can get involved if you're interested. So firstly, why do we need to innovate? So I mean this in kind of the broadest sense. So not just why do we need the latest genetic test or new medical device, but why do we need to innovate at a systems level? And why do we need to embrace innovators and innovations? And how can we do that? So I'm going to use my story as an example of some of the problems that innovators face. So I was working as a surgical trainee, and I was shocked to find out that 29% of patients still have complications after their surgery. So that's a massive health economic impact to the NHS, and it has a massive long-lasting effect on patients. So I started to think, how can we solve this problem? Now, the answer came to me whilst I was out for a run. Now, I probably wasn't going quite as fast as this chap. But let me see if you're awake after lunch. Let me ask you a question. Who here has done any sort of distance event, like a marathon, any long-distance cycle, anything like that? Hands up. No one give me a mobot? No? Okay. Okay. Put your hands up again if you did that distance event without any training whatsoever. There we go. So having a major elective operation has the same effect on the body as running a marathon. So why are we asking our patients to do that without any training whatsoever? So then the next thing to look at is how can we prepare our patients? So I would see people on the wards every day after their surgery, full of morphine, in pain, in a strange environment, chest drains sticking out, with physios trying to teach them rehab exercises. So you can imagine what their learning ability was like in that situation. So I had the idea of taking rehab and making it prehab. Take those breathing routines and exercises they were getting post-operatively and teaching it to patients pre-operatively. And I saw digital media as the best way to do that effectively and cheaply. So I bootstrapped together a pilot. I made a very dodgy website which just about worked, and some homemade videos, some nutritional information, some patient information, some exercises, and gave it to patients for 2 weeks before their surgery. And we had a 3-day reduction in length of stay in our test arm. So 15 patients each side. So that equates to roughly a £1,000 saving per patient for the NHS in direct costs, yet alone the wider health economic impact. So that all sounded pretty good, right? But the hospital and the deanery kind of had other ideas. They told me I had to choose between training and being an entrepreneur. And by the way, we own all of your IP. So you can imagine what my response was. Now, all joking aside, that was a really difficult decision. I was just over a decade of uni and then training as a junior doctor. My wife said, don't do it. My mum said, that's the worst decision you're ever going to make. I said, I'm doing it anyway. And so I left. And then I realized I didn't have the first clue about running a company. I didn't know how to raise capital, hire a team, all the regulations, build out a tech product. I didn't know anything. And on that happy note, we'll leave my story there and look wider across the NHS. So I won't go into any depth. We all know there's been difficulties with the contract. But if we look at the numbers which are associated with that, I think it's really quite scary. 50% of our junior doctors aren't going directly from foundation year into training. They're going off and doing other things. And 5 to 10% of junior doctors are leaving the NHS every year. So that's a massive brain drain. And I think that this is symptomatic of some deeper problems around how we educate people, how we try to pigeonhole people into subspecialties, how we stop people from being innovators. And I think that's problems that we need to look at and address. Otherwise, people like me are going to vote with their feet because they don't want to be penned in as we currently do. And this comes at a time when the NHS faces its biggest financial crisis in its history. We've got a £22 billion black hole in the middle of our finances, and we need to embrace innovations, things like my pre-halving, things like other innovations which have been talked about today, which can help us do things better, more efficiently, and for less money. And if we don't do that, then we're never going to keep up with the demands of the modern NHS. And this is just to kind of reinforce our point, really. If we look at how the NHS was set up, so this is 1948 with Mr. Bevan going around and opening one of the first hospitals. Now, when the NHS was set up, we were very good at acute care, and we still are. So you break your leg, you come in, we patch you up and send you back out again. But what we're not equipped to deal with is an older, fatter, and less healthy population, which is what we have now. So chronic disease in the community is where huge amounts of our money go, and we just let people deteriorate in the community, come in crisis, optimize them, and then send them back out, and they keep on bouncing backwards and forwards. And unless we look at a systems level on how we can embrace innovations and do things differently, and then we're never going to keep up with the demands of modern medicine. So that's a quote by a fairly clever chap. We cannot solve our problems using the same thinking we used when we created them. We need to start embracing innovators. We need to start changing the system to adopt innovations more rapidly, and we need to do it now. There's no putting this off into the future. So, what are we doing about it? The good news is that we're not alone. We don't have to do this as an NHS. There's huge amounts of activity going on in the private sector. Digital health is a rapidly growing market, fastest growing market, and there's some estimates which would say it's going to be worth around 140 billion by 2025 in terms of investment and acquisitions. So there's, and I'm sure Tony would have talked about some of the amazing innovations earlier that are out there in the market. We need to start looking at ways of getting those and bringing them into our common practice. So I'm not going to talk at length about this, but we all know the 5-year forward view and some of its key principles. So prevention and public health, care integration, new models of care, and I would say innovation and technology can help deliver on each and every one of these, and that's why it is such an exciting space. So there is a recognition from the centre that this is the type of thing that we need to be doing, is embracing innovation and looking at new ways of doing things. Now, there's a whole plethora of different schemes. So one of the companies I'm working with, My M Health, we went through the SBRI funding scheme, which helped us get evidence behind our product, helped us develop it, and it was all grant funding. And then we went through the NHS Innovation Accelerator, and through that we've then been put onto the Innovation and Technology Tariff. So we're the first digital health product on there, and we're soon, hopefully, My COPD, which helps COPD patients manage their condition, is soon going to be used all across the NHS to the benefit of patients. But you can have all the schemes you want, but what you really need is one of these. So I put this up, and it's from an anecdote which Tony told me, actually, when he was speaking to one of the senior management at one of the world's biggest companies, who was telling him, look, we're the moonshot company. We want to find that one Luke Skywalker who's going to change the universe. And then we'll back him, and that's how we're going to do things. And Tony replied, well, firstly, Luke Skywalker wouldn't be anything without a mentor. And he needs some support, some help. But one Luke Skywalker by himself still isn't enough. That's still not going to change things. What we need is an army of Luke Skywalkers. We need a whole group of people who are all fighting, who are making new innovations, who are trying to change things, working together. And that's how we're going to address these big, massive problems that we face. And without that network and without that support, it's not going to happen. So that's where the Clinical Entrepreneur program comes in. So I think it's massively disruptive. I don't think there's another program quite like it in the world. So what do? We take our entrepreneurs and we wrap around them services and a network, essentially. So we have some amazing mentors. We have pit stops where we take the lessons which are in kind of a startup boot camp, all things business, and teach them to clinicians, and we fit that in around their kind of busy working lives. We help people with flexible job planning and getting time out of their normal job so they can spend some time on the innovation. We have some startup service providers which can help with operational things around business. And we're looking at new and interesting ways of trying to open up the NHS and global insurance markets. But we wouldn't be anything without the people. So we've got obviously the clinical entrepreneurs. We've got central organisations, so we've got the backing of NHS England and EHSNs who are helping us. We've got some amazing commercial partners, so people like Microsoft, Google, some of the biggest companies in the world, as well as small startups. A whole range of people have really put some skin into the game and helping us to deliver this amazing programme. I think one of the most impressive things for me has been the network. So when I was up in the northeast trying to innovate, I didn't know anyone else who was kind of like me and wanted to change things and do things differently. But then since I've come down here and been part of the program, it's been surrounded by 103 amazing like-minded people, as well as all of the mentors and all the support that gives you. It's been really, really inspiring. And finally, we must mention the mentors, and we're lucky enough to have Paul here with us, who's been kind enough to mentor me. So Paul's a serial entrepreneur, and I think fast becoming a serial mentor as well. But if you want to come up, Paul, and tell us a little bit about your experience.
There is a difference in height here, but there are no
You're
comparisons
like
to Luke Skywalker. And we've also only got one mic, so if I start to talk into his navel, it's because he's wearing a mic.
That's your excuse.
So this all happened, my relationship with the Clinical Entrepreneurs Programme and the NIA and various investments I made in the last 18 months. It was January, a fateful meeting with Tony. And as you'll already experience either in the speech or certainly if you've known him personally, he's very persuasive and very enthusiastic, and he asked me to help the Clinical Entrepreneurs Programme, and I had no idea what a journey that was going to be. I'm fortunate, as Harry said, to be surrounded by 103 people who are all clinical entrepreneurs, who've all got a great idea, their hearts are all in the right place. They're all young and they're all taller than me, which is really embarrassing, but it's the way it is. It's genetics. I have a mantra, which I start with everybody. I start at the end and work backwards. Because why are you trying to do what you're doing? And what problem and whose is it that you're trying to solve? Because a lot of people come to me and say, I've got this great idea and it's going to do this and this and this and this. And as you unfold it's like a book. You go through the pages, you realise that they actually have a lot of debt. They haven't really thought about this from a family perspective. I had one approach me, wonderful chap, great idea, hadn't really thought about the marketplace, but even worse than that, he was about to move house, so take on his first mortgage, and have twins and start a business. And there are a few things wrong with that mix. So start at the end and work backwards. So it is my last point, but it is the one that's really important. Early education. So when people approach us, what does an entrepreneur need to go into the future? Well, they need to know what they're in for. Now, part of the naivety of young entrepreneurs is what we need, because you need people who are going to bash doors down, bruise themselves, pick themselves up again, and keep going. I made the mistake of going into business at 22 years old. By mistake. I happened to come up with this amazing design and everybody wanted it and I didn't realise what I was doing. 2 years later, when I crashed and burned because I grew too quickly, I realised I was unemployable. So I then had to carry on. So I've been an I'm not going to tell you how old I am, it's probably fairly obvious, but it's been a long time of crashing and burning and finally success after success. So early education, I think it goes back into our culture, not just as medics. We did a really interesting thing recently, didn't we, where we profiled everybody, put everybody through a bell bin. And it's no surprise that everybody fitted, the majority of people fitted a particular profile. And that's because the medics have gone through a very structured education system and then a training system. So early education, going right back into schools and so forth, prepares you for what entrepreneurialism is all about. And innovation, but it's not just a new thing. 100 years ago, we would have been talking about how we were going to electrify things, how we were going to enter the agricultural revolution. It's not, entrepreneurialism is not new. It's just that there's more of it about with social media, and more of us have heard about it. So education is starting. Early advice, get lots and lots of early advice. You can never get enough of it. It helps you and helps you and helps you all the way through. And preparation. Having your wife behind you, that seems to be a recurring theme, doesn't it? I was late today because I had an investment committee meeting with my wife. And so it is a recurring theme. It's the whole family that's involved in this. If you speak to my kids, my eldest one had always promised she would never, ever, ever join me in business because she wanted to live or work to live, not live to work. And she just joined me. And I'm going to remind her of that for the rest of her career with me. Hopefully it's a long one. But I think that it's important to really bring everybody with you and get yourself prepared for the innovation. And that comes back to education again. Unless we serve people well, we give people that structure, then you won't really know what you're up for, what you're in for. And distribution. People got this great idea. I have been working with the reinsurance industry for the last 15 years. And part of what I bring to the Clinical Entrepreneurs Programme is a different view of life, because suddenly, and I mean suddenly because it's taken me 15 years to watch the paint dry in the reinsurance industry, they're waking up to what medtech and innovation is all about. And it's because they haven't had to really worry about it before, but for the first time, you'll start to see this happening at regulation level. Regulators are saying, do you know whether or not you've got enough balance sheet cover for the risks that people are going to know when they get their genetic tests, their diagnostics, their biometrics, etc. And of course they don't. So what are the regulators going to say? It's Solvency II all over again with the banks. They're going to have to restructure their balance sheets. They're going to have to know how to do this. And that means they need to get involved with medical innovation. So distribution is a great opportunity in the insurance industry and the reinsurance industry, not just in the NHS. But I don't want to give too much hope because it is as slow to progress and adopt innovation as the NHS is. And medicine generally. They're two parallel universes that occasionally touch and add value and most of the time collide. But there is real opportunity beginning to happen. And I'm doing this, lobbying the whole time with Swiss Re, RG and various others to try and get them to start to invest in medtech innovation. And on Friday, 3 months in, we'll announce 4 investments in medtech innovations with one of the reinsurers. And that's out of 10 investments presented to them within the entrepreneurs environment, clinical entrepreneurs environment. So it's a really, really positive story from the innovation side and from the reinsurance side. Strong networks. Unless we know people, it's a real struggle. And when you get to my age, you discover that just by default, if you've managed to survive this long, you actually know quite a few people who've done the same thing. So your networks at the top of the pyramid are much easier. It's only even those not almost as old as I am. He's a consummate network. He knows everybody, and he's great. He's a strong advocate for each of the entrepreneurs to go and pick up the phone, be brave about this, and say, listen, I've got a clinical entrepreneur here who's got a great idea, great concept. He just needs a break, an entry and introduction. So network's incredibly strong, and without them, you are much more likely to crash and burn. So another key requirement of a clinical entrepreneur. Funding, well, that's an obvious one. But without networks, without distribution, without great boards surrounding you with great people, investors will not invest. It's too high risk. There are too many failures. 98% of them fail. So we're improving that ratio by marrying entrepreneurs together and saying, listen, you've got 3 approximate ideas. Why not get together and form a team? Why not focus your investment? Why not make your first entrepreneurial event or entrepreneurial business a success? Take some money out of it in the future, do some good for humanity and medicine, and actually prove your idea and make it work for patients, and then reinvest any profit you get from that in your own idea later on. Become a serial entrepreneur. And growth. I haven't yet seen any entrepreneurs, clinical entrepreneurs, actually go through that growth pain. Most people are raising capital, getting through to revenue generation. If you're lucky to succeed without being entirely diluted by the end of 3 years, when you go for Series A, Series B or whatever, then fantastic, but it's highly likely that you will not be the person who will be leading that business beyond year 3. And unless you prepare for that on day 1, you're going to be extremely disappointed and redundant. So being able to educate and advise and help the entrepreneurs keep hold of their equity, keep hold of their innovation, be involved in their businesses going forward. They may choose not to be, but again, it comes back to starting at the end and working backwards. Being an entrepreneur doesn't mean to a lot of people being a multimillionaire. It means getting their idea to patients. And I think that's an incredibly valuable thing to be doing within the NHS. A few people want to be billionaires. Well, that's kind of okay, so how on earth are you going to achieve that? Focus on what you're good at, get your idea out, believe in what you're doing, and people, if they won't buy it, you will make money. But decide what you want to do and work backwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. So I just want to give you a few kind of stats, I guess, from the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme. I need to probably update this soon, but we had 103 clinical entrepreneurs in our first year. That's going to be hopefully around 200, Tony? More, very good. Over 200 in our second year. And again, first year doctors, but we're looking to add in allied health professionals and patients ultimately into that as well. We've had around 50 companies being formed and around £12 million of investment raised by clinical entrepreneurs in the last, about 9 months?
Over 30 million.
Over 30? Oh, there you go. There you go. You kept that secret. 15% of doctors are people like me who had left training and have now, because of this program, been able to come back and work clinically again. So we turned what was a brain drain in the NHS into a brain gain, to steal a phrase, Tony. Finally and importantly, the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme takes no equity or IP from the clinical entrepreneurs. In fact, we actively try to help protect it, which can be a challenge at times. So, a couple of examples. So I didn't know Ash was going to be here today. It's a good mugshot. I'm not sure what you've done there, but never mind. So you could keep me on my toes, Ash, to make sure I get this story right. But so Ash founded an app and a company called MediShout, which is actually a exception reporting software. So it connects everyone in the hospital, from the nurses, doctors, to the porters, to the handymen, to the hospital managers. Anyone can report a fault, be it in an equipment or a broken door, and as soon as that fault is repaired, then everyone gets a notification. So it streamlines that whole process. So Ash had managed to do a pilot of this and shown that he could save £15,000 per ward per year by using this software. Is that right, Ash? Yeah. So I don't know how many wards there are in the NHS, but I think that's a pretty big saving if we roll that out system-wide. But then he'd got to a point where he'd developed this and done the pilot, but then didn't have a product that was suitable to scale. He didn't have any funding, and he didn't know how he was going to take it to the next stage. So through the program, he was introduced to some guys called Bronze Lab, who are a web development agency. They were able to put together a version of his product, enter into a contract, and soon it will be ready for wide-scale distribution. And then through the Entrepreneur Program as well, and that network that Paul was talking about, he's had some really good introductions to key decision makers to talk about getting this distributed across the NHS. Next is Nadine. So she's a plastic surgery reg and the founder of Proximally, which is this amazing piece of augmented reality software which allows a surgeon to virtually assist from anywhere in the world. So when you're operating, you can see the virtual surgeon's hand come and point and say, cut this bit, or provide advice during a procedure. So it's really useful for surgical education, but also for things like conflict and disaster zones. So you can have the best surgeon in the world effectively advising and helping to operate in Syria, for example. So through the program, Nadine's had introductions into the Defence Medical Services and having some really interesting conversations there. When I was talking to her about this presentation, she said that one thing that she's really found is it used to be almost seen as a dirty word to say that you're an entrepreneur in the NHS. You're kind of looked upon with suspicion. But now you've got the kind of backing and blessing, as it were, of NHS England, and you're an NHS England clinical entrepreneur. That kind of opens doors for you, which would have previously been shut, and you're much better received. And if we go back to my story, so remember I'd left and jumped ship and didn't know what to do next. And I was thinking, this is going to take me at least 2 years. It's probably going to take me about £2 million to get this product to where I want it to be. But through the mentor network, I was introduced to the guys at My Health and had a good chat with their founder, Simon. And I really came around to this concept of partnership working. So they already had done the hard yards, they already built a product, they'd gone through all of the IG, they had all of the software, they had the in-house team. So instead of me trying to do it all from scratch and reinvent the wheel, I'm building on what they already have, repurposing their technology and using it for rehabilitation. So my product, instead of being 2 years away, is now should be on the market by about September and in the hands of patients. I've also been helping My Health with selling their existing products. So they have COPD, asthma, diabetes, and heart failure apps for patients to educate themselves, and also allow for remote monitoring of clinicians. And what's really exciting with my COPD across kind of my area, which is the east of England, we should soon have around 15,000 licenses out there. So that's going to be 15,000 patients who know how to use their inhalers better, 15,000 patients who've got pulmonary rehabilitation. So it's going to have real direct impacts on these patients' lives. And that's just a wonderful thing to be involved with. And then another important thing that the program's given me, it's given me the ability to come back and practice clinically. So having left the NHS and not using my skills at all, I'm now able to work part-time as an A&E reg in Harlow, able to continue collecting evidence and keep my validation up, which is really important. And then the last thing I'll talk about quickly is Care Rooms. So that's a company I'm founding with, or co-founding with Paul, and that's hopefully going to be the Airbnb of domiciliary care. So we're going to get people to rent out their rooms in the houses to patients. We're going to help to solve the 6.5 million bed days lost by the NHS in bed blocking and help to tackle that problem, break down social isolation for our hosts, and provide a better experience for patients. So that's a really exciting project. We've just raised some seed funding for that. We're going live for a pilot in Norfolk, and we have 24 hospitals who have asked to be part of our main launch towards the back end of this year. So watch this space, because I think this one's going to be huge. So we talked a lot about the Clinical Entrepreneur Program. I hope you're all suitably excited and want to get involved. So firstly, we're always keen to get the word out, so if anyone can tweet the hashtag, I think it's on the next page, tell your colleagues, friends about it. Come and join us. So we initially were just junior doctors, but I'd say we're branching out into other allied health professionals, into senior doctors and consultants, and we had everyone from medical students right up to nearly retired consultants in the interviews recently. So we were very inclusive, and if anyone's interested, then drop me a line. My email's on the next slide. And finally, we're always looking for new partners and mentors. So if you think you've got skills and experience and some scars to show for it, as Paul was saying, then and you want to be a mentor, then that'd be really great to hear from you. And we're as always looking for partners who may be able to help some of the clinical entrepreneurs take forward their innovations. So that's about it from me. Feel free to drop me an email, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only person with such a ridiculous name, so it'll be easy. Thank you very much.